All right, Stephanie.
Hi, this is Stephanie, and on today's adventures, let's try that again. I was about to be like, and on today's adventures in Odyssey, and that is not what I have written down. I was going to say, hi, this is Stephanie, and on the Wonderful World of Odyssey podcast today, your host, Charles, and your co-host, Bree, are going to talk to a special guest and learn all about his adventure career in Odyssey.
Stephanie, you can ask the first question.
Ooh, okay. So I have some fan questions. So I'll ask the first one on there. Pick a number 1 through 10.
For me, pick a number 1 through 10?
Yes.
7.
7. All right. When are we going to hear from the chairman again?
Yes. So I can't answer every question, and I certainly can't give you a date on that one. But I can say just what Marshall had said on a podcast sometime in the last year, I believe, is that we have some other story arcs going on right now that we do need to wrap up. And you'll be seeing some of those wrap-ups in the days ahead. But when we finish with those, we are planning on going back to the chairman, and we are planning on doing more of a storyline with at least the story arcs that have been set up with the chairman. So there are plans for that. Don't want to say too much more because it is still a little ways off. Don't want to overpromise. And of course, we don't want to spoil anything. But there is more coming with the chairman.
Woohoo! Thank you.
Brady, you're next.
What have you learned from Adventures in Odyssey?
Yeah, boy. Yeah. Well, this could easily take up the whole podcast. I mean, I've learned many things. There's probably 2 levels to that question. There are the things that I've learned from listening to the show, and then there are the things I've learned from working on the show. So from listening to the show, just to start listing lessons would feel kind of trite. One thing I do notice myself doing is that in my life, I will still think, what would Wit do in this situation? So that is just kind of a mantra that I don't always, but often come back to in my life of what would Wit do in this situation. Now I'm also a person who has written for Wit, so there's at least a little tiny twinge of my voice in Wit on occasion too. So as far as like working behind the scenes, I think acknowledging God's place in your life and making God the center of your life, whether that's your personal life, your professional life, your creative life. It's so easy to get wrapped up in, well, these are my ideas and this is my work and this is my story. But we all know that God gives us any talents that we have. And so rather than getting too attached to what things are mine, I really need to give any credit for anything to God. And take any blame for anything that I didn't do well on myself. So that's probably a couple of lessons that I can think of. There are many more.
Where is Odyssey located at?
Yeah, this might be the podcast of unanswerable questions, or as so often happens in our podcast, we have to kind of dodge some of the questions. So, I mean, we know that Odyssey is in the Midwest, and there are websites out there. I think we included even a page in one of the official, right here, one of the official guidebooks about states where Odyssey is not, because of things listed in the episode where people will talk about another state, which clearly is not Odyssey. So we know that it's somewhere in the Midwest. We know there are some key pieces of information that kind of narrow it down. We know it's not that far from Chicago. We know it's north of the Ohio River. We know that, about the amount of time it took Eugene and Bernard to drive to California. So you can kind of start to get an idea where it is in the country, but really it's just the kind of thing that, not to sound kind of silly about it, but it's like wherever you believe Odyssey is when you're listening to the show, that's probably where it is. Just like, we have pictures of some of the characters, but really whatever you're thinking the characters look like when you're listening to the episode, that's what they look like.
Stephanie, you want to ask another one of your questions?
I would love to. Someone asked, when will we hear more from the Plesky family, Shelley, Miles, and Darcy?
Oh, I think the Plotsky family.
Plotsky, I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing that wrong.
Yeah. No, I wondered if it was an internet glitch. I didn't quite get the last name.
I just can't talk.
But we do actually, there is an episode in album 78, which starts releasing on the club here pretty soon, that does have Darcy in it.
Awesome.
So we'll hear from Darcy again before too long.
Woohoo!
All right. If you could play a character in Odyssey, which character would it be?
One of the existing characters?
Or a character like
Or a
you?
new character? Oh, like me? Well, I have played several characters in Odyssey, for better or for worse. And when you're around people like the actors who work on Adventures in Odyssey, who are the best voice actors in the world, then you quickly realize that you're not a voice actor. At least I quickly realized that, because they are so talented at voice acting, and I am not so talented at voice acting. So I should not be a character on Adventures in Odyssey, because we have people who know what they're doing who can do that. I've played a couple of minor characters on the show. The biggest part that I have that apparently was written for me was the MC of Comic Connellsville. So that's been my I don't even think he has a name, but that's been my character in Odyssey. And I've had a couple of others here and there. But again, for the most part, I want to leave the acting to the actors.
Stephanie, you want to do it? We'll just go in order.
Oh, am I next?
Yeah.
I have. Somebody asked, when is the back shelf bake off coming back? I don't.
Back Shelf Bake Off coming back. Well, in fact, there's, I think this is okay. There is an episode coming up that features Back Shelf Bake Off pretty heavily.
Oh boy.
And we'll be hearing quite a bit more about Back Shelf Bake Off. I don't want to say too much more about that. That's coming up on the club next year.
Awesome.
But yes, we will be hearing more about Back Shelf Bake Off. And that's something that one of our writers, Abigail Geiger, has just developed over the years, and it's just taken on this life of its own. It was just kind of a silly background thing in one episode, and she really wanted that idea to continue, and it's just gotten bigger and bigger. And then in this episode that you're going to hear, it takes center stage.
Awesome.
What character are you most like?
What character am I most like? Well, probably my favorite character on the show, and I don't know that this will ever change. My favorite character on the show is Eugene, and my family has told me that I have some similarities with Eugene, not necessarily his massive intellect, but just in his social mannerisms. I think I have some similarities with him. My favorite character to write for is Edwin Blackguard, and there are moments, not so much anymore, probably when I was younger, when I would kind of act like Edwin Blackguard. Not that I would, naturally be that way. He wasn't necessarily like me, but I would try to be like him.
Now I have
Stephanie, you're next.
I have another question to follow up with that. Have you ever been like Shakespeare the door?
No, I don't think I have, although for quite a while, there's a show called A Class Act where Edwin teaches an acting class, and when he really doesn't want to be teaching these peasants to act. He thinks he's so above them, and people kept after one of the classes, I think it was the first class, then people are coming up to him and asking him things, saying, "Mr. Blackguard," and he'd say, "Yes." And for a while, I would answer the phone that way. Answer the phone, "Yes," like Edwin Blackguard. But I don't think I've ever held the door and said Shakespeare. But I should start doing that.
Next time you're in the studio,
Keep it
mess with
alive.
them. All right,
Yeah.
so my serious
And a
question.
lot of the newer cast members on the show wouldn't even know who that is,
True.
because Edwin hasn't been around in a little while.
So sad. I loved Edwin.
So, how many AIO albums will there be?
Well, as far as Odyssey albums, they could continue indefinitely, right? You know, the cassette albums had a certain ending, but that didn't mean albums stopped. And physical media will someday have an end, but that doesn't mean the albums have to stop. So as long as Adventures in Odyssey continues, there'll be albums. And I think pretty much everyone who's predicted a number for when Odyssey will end has been wrong, because Odyssey's still going. So I don't know that I should predict a number. I know there'll be at least, well, there'll be at least 80. There'll be more than that, but there'll be at least 80 because we've planned through album 80, but we're already planning past that.
Stephanie?
Will you release a new official guide now that there's 2,000 episodes?
Yeah, good question. And that actually came up not too long ago here. There's a little bit of discussion about that, but there are multiple challenges with that. One is, and I just picked it up a minute ago, but the official guide is already pretty big, and this one ends at, what's it end at? The last episode number in here is 726, so it would be another quarter longer. So this book is getting pretty big, expensive, and heavy already. So to make it even bigger and keep expanding it, I don't know. I don't know if we want to keep making a book that big. The other is just the way that people consume information like this now. The book came out just as the Adventures in Odyssey Club was starting. And so a lot of that kind of information is part of the behind the scenes of the club now and part of the Adventures in Odyssey podcast and other places. So I don't know if there's enough of a market for people who want to buy a big, huge book like that anymore. But if there is, then we wouldn't rule out the possibility that we'd create another guide. There's nothing in the works right now. We don't have a plan for this year or next year or anything to come out with a guidebook, but never say never.
Are there any disagreements when writing and producing AIO episodes?
Are there ever not disagreements? So, no, I mean, the Bible talks about iron sharpening iron, and that's in the Bible, it's more talking about how we act personally, that our one man sharpens another. And I think that's what that's intended to be talking about is, the way that we act, and that being around other Christians helps us to become better Christians. Or being around other Christians helps us to become better Christians. And I think that's also true from a creative standpoint of we have a lot of creative, just inspirational, passionate individuals who work on this show, and we disagree all the time. I mean, if we all agreed, it would be very boring. So every episode has a lot of disagreements on it. And those disagreements very often, almost always, make the show better. And that's part of the creative process. If you have a creative team where you're all agreeing on everything, then you probably need to bring some other people into your creative team to disagree with some things.
You're next, Stephanie.
Let's see. I've got 1, 2, 3 more. I think the big one they wanted to know was, will there be more episodes with the big homeschool family? And also, can we please not make them like the Duggar-ish family and ask for homeschool input? I had a big homeschool family that texted me and was like, hey, they need some input, text me. I was like, okay, I'll be sure to bring it up.
It's a very common request for us to have more homeschool characters. And in fact, I don't want to overpromise because things can always change. I mean, we're talking about the disagreements or the discussions about things on some of these previous questions. And so anything that we have in process can always change. That said, we did have a meeting not too long ago where we were talking about that homeschool family.
Awesome.
And I have to be careful because in that meeting, and I'm probably going to say it backwards, but one of our writers, Abigail Geiger, I mentioned her previously, she said that there's a distinction between homeschoolers and homeschooled, I think it was. You guys are nodding, so I'm already, and I'm sorry, Abby, if you watch this, I can't remember which one was the term that you're supposed to use. But anyway, she's very aware of that world and was interested in developing that family further. And so whether it's in audio episodes or in the comics, I believe we will see or hear more from that homeschooled family.
Cool.
Will the Mulligan family ever return?
Well, I'm always careful to, or try to be careful to never say never. I mean, there are a few things that will never happen on Odyssey, but as I think many of the things that over the years, people who were working on the show might have said, "Oh, we'll never do that," and then the show has ended up doing it because it's gone on for so long, and so a lot of things that seemed impossible have now become possible. So with that in mind, though, we don't have any plans for the Mulligans to return. The actors are in various states of available or moved out of town or have busy with other things, and I feel like the show has kind of moved on from the Mulligans, so it's not that we couldn't bring them back. Mike Mulligan came back not that long ago. He hadn't been on the show in quite a while, and then he was in I guess it's been a little while now since this episode that I'm talking about, but he came back after a long period and was on the show. So we always could bring them back. I was listening to an episode from a podcast listener not long ago asking about Tony and Brianna, who are from 23, 24 years ago in an episode called Chains. And right now we don't have any plans to bring them back, but would the right story come along? Could someone get an idea for how we could use Tony and Brianna or someone from the Mulligan family? If there was a good story to it, then why would we say, no, we're not going to go there? So we always could bring them back.
Stephanie.
Giggling at my next question. It says, do you like tuna sandwiches with pickles?
I'm not a big fan of either, to be honest. Tuna sandwiches or pickles. So I do like fish, but there's just something about the texture of tuna that I don't especially like on sandwiches. I like fish on its own, but not necessarily in a sandwich. And pickles are, I can either take or leave. You know, they're not something that I'm excited about eating. If I get a sandwich with pickles on it, I'll eat it. You know, if I get a Chick-fil-A original sandwich and forget to leave the pickles off, I'll eat the pickles. But they're not high on my priorities for a lunch.
Got a follow-up question to that. If you were stranded on a deserted island and could bring one food, what would that be?
One food? Well, it's kind of convenient because there probably would be these depending on where this island is, but my favorite food is coconut. So any food you'd get sick of eventually, but I think coconut a good long time.
Bree, next question for you.
I don't know.
Stephanie?
Well, Boswell is apparently wanting to say hi.
Is this cat really named
she
Boswell?
always comes across the podcast.
And his or her name is really Boswell?
No, well, we renamed her Boswell because she walks across our podcast so much that now I just get like Boswell. Oh, Boswell.
She looks a lot
we call
like
her
the cat
Panther.
that I had growing up. It looks a lot like the cat I had in my house growing up. Huh.
That is awesome. I had one more, and I don't know where I wrote it. Barrett Jones. Will Barrett Jones come back so that we can hear him and his sister Emily interact?
Another good question, and kind of like I wish I had for some of these more satisfying answers, like why yes, next year Barrett will have a whole story arc. But the actual answer is we don't have any plans for Barrett. The actor who played Barrett has has aged significantly from when he was on the show, and so he's an adult now, and so he would sound significantly different. His sister is played by, and was from the beginning played by, an adult, and so her voice hasn't changed, and so that's why Emily has had a longer life than her brother Barrett. No plans for Barrett, but again, if there was the right story, especially something connected to Emily, for Barrett to come back, then sure, we could have Barrett come back. We just have to figure out how old he is, because that's an eternal question on Odyssey, is how old is everyone at a particular moment in time?
Oh, I have one more. Will Kidsborough have more episodes?
Kidsborough did make several appearances in the Odyssey comics in the last year. And so don't expect it to be on the audio show, at least in the near future. We've used some of the characters from Kidsborough in different ways. I mean, Valerie has continued, Ryan has continued, but we haven't gone back to that concept for the audio show. And I don't see us doing that in the near future. Again, it's a never say never. But what happened to Kidsborough was explored in the comics.
What is your favorite AIO episode?
Oh boy, favorite AIO episode. Yeah, I should have a better answer to this, because people ask me this fairly often, and I usually give some more generic answer. When I was growing up, my favorite episode was Waylaid in the Windy City. And I still like that episode a lot. That'd still be one of my favorites. I love the setting. I love the little twists and turns and surprises. I love how it brings back characters from previous years. I think it just feels like a real good thriller. And of course, I love Dr. Blaggard and Richard Maxwell, who are in that show. I look at episodes differently from when I started working on the show, because before that, I know a lot of the behind the scenes now because I worked on, the official guide, and I've been behind the scenes, so I've heard stories about those times. But once I started working on the show, then I know the shows in a different way. So probably the favorite episode that I've worked on, it's not my favorite script. I don't think it was my best work, but it's the episode that I wrote that I've gotten by far the most comments on. And even still, even though it's been more than 20 years, I still get comments on this episode. And that's The Pact. Again, not my favorite episode from a scripting point of view. I do this with many of my episodes, but were I to go back to that one, I would change a lot of things about it. But for whatever reason, I think this is, once again, God using the show. But for whatever reason, I've gotten a lot of comments from people on that episode, and even comments beyond the story itself, beyond talking about things that happen in the story, people who have been inspired by that episode, like to reconnect with friends, and to like when my mother-in-law listened to that episode for the first time, she was bawling, she was in tears, and it was really meaningful to her because of some things that had happened in her life. And I didn't realize that it was going to be that way when I wrote it. I didn't really write it to be this big, heart-wrenching episode. I was just interested in the story, and the kind of the mystery story part of it. But it's just been an episode that, for whatever reason, has touched people.
What other projects have you worked on besides Adventures in Odyssey?
What other projects? Well, Adventures in Odyssey pretty much has been my career. I started working on Odyssey when I was 20 years old, when I was still in college, and here I am. I'm still working on the show. So as far as I'm concerned, I'll keep on working on it as long as I can. So I haven't had a lot of other big projects that I've worked on. There have been other things here at Focus. There have been other freelance jobs that I've had a small part of, not part of like a major, unless I'm missing something that I can't think of, not really a part of a creative team like I am on Odyssey. So yeah, you'd probably have to Google search your way to find some project that I had some little tiny part of. But Odyssey's been the major thing that I've done.
Will there be another Will there be another Get in the Show contest?
Yeah, that's probably besides when are Connie and Mitch going to get married, and how old is Mr. Whitaker? That's probably the third most asked question from our listeners. And it's a good question because it was a popular contest, and in both cases, Get in the Show led to, in the case of Shona, it's led to a person who's been on the show for a very long time. And then also the second Get in the Show contest has led to some roles as well. But we don't have any plans for another Get in the Show contest. I feel like we need to do it again someday because it was so popular. But we don't have any plans for one right now. It would have to work a little differently than some of the earlier contests, in particular the first one, because the first one revolved around bookstores. And so I don't know that the next one would revolve around bookstores as much. I mean, Shona and her sister went into a bookstore. And so I don't think it would probably involve bookstores as intricately, but that's not to say we couldn't do it.
How did you hear about AIO?
How did I hear about it? I started listening to Odyssey sometime during the first year. I was young enough that I don't remember specifically the first episode. I remember listening to The Case of the Secret Room Part 2, I believe, on the radio. And so it was sometime before that. It was when it first aired on the radio. I remember sitting on the counter in my parents' kitchen, and they had this little this radio that was mounted under the kitchen cabinets. It had like a little button you could push and a cassette. You could put a cassette in and slide it back in, but it also had a radio attached to it. And I think my mom had heard something on the Focus on the Family broadcast about Adventures in Odyssey and thought it was something I would like. So I remember sitting on the counter and listening to Odyssey. So it was sometime in 1988 that I started listening, and I believe my mom introduced it to me.
How would you describe the town of Odyssey?
Yeah, the town of Odyssey, for a long time, when I listened to it before I was involved in the behind the scenes, I would think of Odyssey just as my town, the town that I grew up near. And my town was very small. The one town, the town that's the zip code where my parents still live, there's not even a stoplight in town. There are stop signs in town, but no stoplights. So it's a pretty small town. So I would think of that when I think of Odyssey. Now that I've been involved more behind the scenes, I think of Odyssey more like I'll think of the map of Odyssey that we recently created, or I'll think of like all the discussions we've had about where things are in town. That kind of has informed my mental map of the show. But kind of like we talked about a while ago about like pictures of the characters, what they look like. I feel like that's one of the great things about radio drama is that everyone would describe it differently. Even if you got people who work on the show here and have them describe the town of Odyssey, then all of them are going to describe it a little bit differently. And that's something that's pretty unique about audio drama versus other entertainment, especially visual entertainment like TV shows or movies. When you ask how what the town of Mayberry looks like, it looks pretty similar to everybody because everybody has seen it. Everybody's watched it. And so it's established what it looks like. Whereas with audio, we talk about it just enough to spark your imagination, and then your brain fills in the rest of the pieces. So you're part of creating the show with us. So that's one thing I like about Odyssey is that it's not too locked down because we have a million versions of it out there and a million imaginations.
Now, how do the verses fit in with the AIO episodes?
How do the what?
Verses, like Bible verses?
How do the Bible verses fit in with episodes?
Yeah.
We incorporate verses into a lot of episodes. I mean, the Adventures in Odyssey is based on Bible and biblical principles. And so you'll hear verses from the characters' mouths. You'll hear Whit or Connie or Eugene or Wooten or all sorts of characters talk about Bible verses. You'll hear Chris mention them at the end of episodes. And then there are some episodes that are based very directly on Bible stories. They're either telling Bible stories or they're like modern day adaptations of Bible stories. My son was just listening to, oh, hi, Boswell. My son was just listening to The Buck Starts Here a few days ago, and that's a Odyssey adaptation of the parable of the parable of the talents. I almost said the parable of the workers. The parable, which is a different parable, which there's another Odyssey episode about that one. But The Buck Starts Here is the parable of the talents, modern day retelling of that. So yeah, I'd say if that's what you're asking, I'd say Bible verses are incorporated all throughout Adventures in Odyssey.
Will there be any more Imagination Station books?
Imagination Station books, yes. No end in sight for the Imagination Station series, so there are several more Imagination Station books coming out next year, and more planned after that.
Any more Imagination Station audio drama episodes?
Once again, I'm sure that there will be more Imagination Station. I'm trying to think if we have one planned that has not aired yet. I don't think that there's one that's been recorded that hasn't aired yet, unless I'm missing it, which is very possible. But there are more in the planning stages. In fact, Bob Smithhauser and Abigail Geiger are working on another Bible story that will be, I believe, will be Imagination Station. Sometimes with our stories, especially stories that take place out of the normal world of Odyssey, we look at a lot of different vehicles, we call them, to tell the story. Because with a Bible story, you could tell that as an audio drama. I'm sorry, they're all audio dramas. As a kid's radio drama, you could tell it as Imagination Station. You could tell it as like OT Action News. You could have Wit telling the story to a kid, sitting the kid down and telling him the story, him or her, the story. So in the case of this story that they're writing, I believe it's going to be Imagination Station, but you never know. By the time it gets to a finished episode, it could end up being something else.
Will Buckles ever return?
Yeah, I shouldn't say too much about Buckles because we're going to be hearing a lot about that in the next few episodes. At least we're going to be hearing a lot more about Buck and Jules. On whether they'll get back together or not, that's TBD. But we'll definitely be hearing more from both Buck, from the Buck and the Coles, from Buck and Jules in future shows.
So after Eugene died, how are you doing the episodes with the Melster family?
Yes. Well, I know what you mean, but of course, Eugene didn't die. The actor who played Eugene did pass away, but the character of Eugene lives on. And that was something that was important to Will, too, was that the character should live past him. But we have had some shows that are in Baltimore. In fact, I think we've already talked about this. There'll be some shows in Baltimore in Album 78 that have Buck and Katrina in them. Eugene doesn't appear in those shows. He's off screen. But of course, we've also had the episodes where Eugene and family left town, where we did hear from Eugene. And that's a whole... we did multiple podcasts about that one, where we used a technology from a company called Respeecher with the permission of Will's estate and working with the other actors to recreate his voice. It's not something we're going to do regularly. We'd only do it very occasionally. It was necessary for that story to tell the story of Eugene leaving town without him being off screen for the whole story. And as you may be aware, we also used it briefly in the live show we recorded here in Colorado Springs last summer. So Eugene did make an appearance here. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to mention that now. What's that?
Y'all made me cry.
Oh.
Y'all made me cry. I was having so much fun, and then Eugene's voice came on, and I was like, oh!
Well, and we didn't plan it this way too far in advance, but it ended up being that both Whit and Eugene were remote for that because, of course, Will had passed away, but then also Andre wasn't able to be there in person, and so both of them ended up being remote for that. That was Andre's I don't even know what the right term is. That was Andre's unaltered voice for that. And then with Will, we use that same process with that company called Respeecher to recreate Will's voice. And yeah, we could do a whole podcast about this, and we have, but it's important to point out in those limited times that we have had Eugene's recreated voice, then we have had an actor, Townsend Coleman, who performed those lines for him.
Did you go to the grand party?
I did. we
I watched you at Grand Party.
Yeah. Well, did the stage directing for the live show. There were a lot of pieces of One Grand Party that was in planning for several years leading up to that event, and it was a milestone event for Odyssey. It was a milestone event for Focus. It was certainly a milestone for me personally. You know, that's trying to think of some comparison and trying not to sound too grandiose about it, but I feel like that might have been the project in my life that I spent the most time working on, was that weekend of One Grand Party. And it was funny when it was going on, because we would have events like the Thursday night event that we called Night at the Soda Shop, that was in planning for years. And then we got to the end of it, and it was 45 minutes long, and it was over. And I felt like I wanted to chase it down and, pull it back and experience it again, because it went by so quickly. We were planning for so long, and then it was over. But that's just kind of the nature of events. You can't really, you can go back and watch the recordings of them, but you can only experience them in person once.
Are there any plans on releasing it as an album?
Not as an album, but there will be videos from the event on the Adventures in Odyssey Club coming next year. We'll be giving some details on that in pretty soon here on some podcasts. We'll be talking about what's coming. But probably not, at least, again, never say never, but no plans for physical release at this point. But yes, on the Adventures in Odyssey Club.
So, talking about the new album, it's on the club right now, but you can't listen to it. Is that a glitch?
The new album, meaning album 78 at face value?
Yeah, it's on the club right now. Like the first episode is.
I'll have to go take a look at that. It may be intended as a preview, but after this interview is over, I'll go and take a look and see if there is a glitch. But very soon you'll be able to listen to the episodes starting, just as we do with all the albums, where they're released weekly over 6 weeks. So I'll take a look and see if there's any kind of a glitch there. But you're not supposed to be able to listen to it until a little over a week from now.
Well, it just plays an Odyssey Adventure Club episode, so.
Okay. Yeah, let me go take a look. I'll see what's up there.
So, do you write any episodes with Kathy Buchanan?
We have, yes. And the way our team works is that every episode's very collaborative. My job title is line producer for Adventures in Odyssey, and I don't need to necessarily explain everything that means. But part of what I do for the show is read the episodes as they're in pitch form, outline form, first draft, second draft, polish, and give notes and make refinements to the script. And so pretty much all the shows all the Adventures in Odyssey shows, I've had something to do with. In many cases, it's very small what I've had to do with it. It might be tweaking a line or making some suggestions or coming up with titles or scheduling, but generally the writer is very heavily responsible for what's in that show, and most of what's in that show, from the scripting standpoint at least, comes from the writer. But Kathy and I have written episodes together, and there was an episode called The Champ of the Camp that we wrote, and we actually kind of handed back and forth between drafts.
You think you're going to get Kathy Buchanan to let us interview her one day?
I will mention this to her. We're recording a podcast on Monday, a Q&A podcast. Some of these same questions may come up in that podcast, but we're recording an episode on Monday, and I will mention this to her.
And what podcast is that?
It's twice a year we do Yeah, twice a year on the official Adventures in Odyssey podcast, we do a Q&A of fan questions where people can call in and ask questions. And we, as the writing team, try and answer those, or at least kind of like I do in this interview, kind of answer as many as we can and then dodge some and obfuscate and answer around some of them.
Will there be any more video official Adventures in Odyssey podcast episodes?
There will be. Yes, there will be. In fact, the last one for this year. So actually, it's coming up pretty quick, 3 weeks from today, which is Christmas Day. Boy, Christmas Day is 3 weeks from today when we're recording this. But that will be a video podcast. And we have several more planned in the new year. But at the very least, the one December 25th is planned as a video podcast.
We're also interviewing Bob Smithhauser tomorrow.
That's what he said. Yeah, great. It'll be a good interview. He'll have good things to say.
Oh, so you already knew.
Yes. Well, he mentioned it to me. In fact, I think he's gone for the day. But Bob Smithhauser sits just over that wall. So just behind that poster back there is where.
Well, if he's not gone, hi.
So, hi, Bob, if you're still there. No, I think he's gone for the day. But earlier, he could have popped his head over the cube.
So this is the studio that you all work in?
Well, it's not a studio. Our sound designers do work in studios. They need to because they need the soundproof room to do the work that they do. So the closest I get to a studio is these headphones that I'm mostly wearing. I have one off my ear so I can hear how loud I'm talking. But I work in a cube alongside Marshall Younger's right over there, Abigail Geiger, Megan Rolifson. They all sit right by me here. And also our Adventures in Odyssey marketing team is right over next to me.
Oh, so that's where Marshall was when we interviewed him, Bree.
If he was at Focus, he was, 2 cubes that way.
I don't know where Phil Aller was when we interviewed him.
Yeah. Now, Phil doesn't live here in Colorado Springs. Phil's heavily involved with Adventures in Odyssey, but he works for the show freelance. He's not an employee of Focus. Getting into the weeds here a little bit, but he actually lives in Arizona.
Now, how do you get a job like AIO?
You know, there's not one answer to that. There are probably as many answers as there are people who work on Adventures in Odyssey. All of us have come to the show from a different background. You know, I came from, the main background that I had was I grew up listening to the show. And so I came from a fan background, really. I went to college for media communication, but really the biggest thing that trained me for this job was listening to Adventures in Odyssey. And then some of our sound designers have come from a radio background. Chuck Bolte and Paul McCusker came from a stage drama background. They were involved with a group called Jeremiah People, which was part of the Continental Singers. And so that was their background. Paul in particular wrote a number of plays, and Chuck was involved in a lot of things, but he was involved in these stage productions, and that's what led him to Adventures in Odyssey, and what led Adventures in Odyssey to him. At least Focus on the Family dramas, they were looking for someone who had that kind of expertise, and that's what led them to Chuck Bolte. For Marshall, he had written an audio drama in college. That wasn't what he was pursuing. He was pursuing like script and screenwriting. But he wrote an audio drama in college that the person who did the sound effects sent it to Focus, hoping to get a job as a sound designer. And I think it was Paul who had the kind of goofy job of calling the person and saying, well, we're not really interested in you as a sound designer, but who wrote the script? We are interested in him. So again, and I could tell stories about everybody who came to Odyssey, and it's all from different backgrounds. So people come to the team from all different ways. I mean, really the real practical, kind of boring-ish answer is the way that you get a job with Adventures in Odyssey is when one becomes available, apply for it. So just like everywhere else, Focus on the Family, we post our jobs online. And so if there's an Adventures in Odyssey job that is posted online, it does happen from time to time, then apply for it.
I hear the background noises. Is there some people there right now?
I haven't heard a lot of background noise. I'm not sure if it's for me, but if it is, there may still be other people working here. I see a few other lights on over there. It's after hours, but people might be working late, or maybe they came in late, or they have a job to finish up. So there might be other people here.
But all those cubicles are for AIO.
Well, the ones in this corner, so those, what did I mention? 5. So those 5 right here are Adventures in Odyssey. And then we have the folks in marketing who also work on Adventures in Odyssey are next door. But we have hundreds of people who work at Focus. And so there are hundreds of, if you look at this whole building, there are hundreds of cubes here. This is just our little Odyssey corner.
Now, did you do a tour of the cubicles at the grand party?
A tour of the cubicles. We didn't have people come back to the cubicles, no. I think it was one of the things we knew going into, but really realized in the course of one grand party, is that our building here is an office building. It wasn't really built as a conference center, so we made it work for one grand party to have 3,000 people here in the morning and 3,000 people here in the afternoon. But the building itself was not meant to have that many people. And so trying to have that many people come through and see our cubes might have been hard for crowd control. And we wanted this to be a great experience for everybody. And seeing my cube would not be very interesting. There's not that much to see. I mean, there's a couple of fun things on the walls, but beyond that, it looks like pretty much every other cube. There's a computer here, there's a keyboard and mouse, and that's about it.
No, so not very exciting.
No, I mean, exciting things happen here. I think so anyway. I think what I get to do for work is exciting. But as far as, seeing the cube, not that exciting.
Now, what time do you get to work?
It depends on the day. For the most part, Focus is open from 8 in the morning until 5 at night. So that's my typical work day. Now, I have a family, and so occasionally, like my son has an early basketball practice, so I'll come in an hour early, or he has a basketball game in the afternoon, so I'll leave a little bit early. Or, we have various trips, things that happen, so, I'll be coming and going at different times. But for the most part, typical day is get here at 8 and leave around 5.
I had a question.
I'll come back, Charlie. I'll come back in like 30 minutes to check so we can make the rolling, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You probably already answered this question, but what is it like writing AIO episodes?
What is it like writing AIO episodes? Well, I think it's a lot of different emotions. I think one of the things that, and I want to phrase this the right way, but writing is hard. Writing is very difficult. It's wonderful and it's exciting, and seeing it all come together is very gratifying. But writing is very difficult. It's not something, and I believe all of our writers would say the same thing, even people who have done it for a long time, is that writing's hard. There's, for people who haven't done writing for a living on a regular basis, there's probably, for some people, some rose-colored glasses of just how fun and effortless and easy that is. And it is fun, but it's not easy and effortless. It's just creating something. The act of creation in writing is just it's just very tough. In fact, that's one of the reasons, not that it's tough, but my skill set is not necessarily just in writing Adventures in Odyssey episodes. In fact, my skill set is more in other areas that are connected to writing and connected to creativity. But you may have noticed in recent years, I haven't written as many episodes because I've been focused on other areas that I am more skilled in. And so we have a lot of people who are skilled very specifically in writing and creating for Adventures in Odyssey. And we're very blessed to have those people. And my, I'm kind of veering from your question, but my skill set has been in supporting those creative efforts in a lot of different ways. So being involved in the creative process without necessarily writing as many episodes as I used to. So trying to give any other specific answer as far as what it's like writing Adventures in Odyssey. The people that we work with too are great. So the people who give notes on the shows and the fellow writers who work on the shows, it's great to have a creative team that's so passionate about what they do and so good at what they do. So that's part of what it's like. Writing for Adventures in Odyssey is working with great people.
Will Connie ever get married?
Yeah, that's a never say never. I know there are strong opinions about that among our fans and even among our crew. But again, that's certainly no time in the near future. Have no plans for her to get married in the near future. But who can say that something's impossible? It's not impossible.
You're part of the writing team, you said, right?
Yes, at least part of the Adventures in Odyssey creative team. Again, not writing as many episodes these days, but still very involved with the writing team. We don't necessarily have we say, okay, these people are the writing team and they are only the writing team. We do have people who write episodes, but we don't necessarily say, okay, here's the writing team. No one else is allowed to come there. So we have people who write a lot more episodes per year than I do.
Well, I had a new character villain for the show.
New character villain?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Blackboard.
Oh, Dr. Blackboard. Okay. And his minion, the eraser, and
Basically, yeah.
It sounds like it could be a comic character, because it sounds like it could be. I'm not sure what you're intending, but
For Captain Absolutely.
Oh, for Captain Absolutely. Okay. I was going to say, so comics then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we do have comics on a regular basis now. Evan David and his team create those. So yeah, we can explore some areas with those that we can't on the audio show because they're more visual, and also because we don't necessarily have to have a voice actor connected to the comics. And so some characters who have, even characters that we've talked about, characters who have moved on from the audio show because the actor or actress is not available for some reason, they can show up in the comics. So I don't know if there's a place in the comics for Dr. Blackboard, but who knows?
You could talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told Marshall Younger about that, but I haven't heard anything.
Well, our development process is pretty long, so I don't want to give you any hope one way or the other. But it's interesting. Sometimes we'll get letters from fans of the show, and they'll write in saying, can you have this on the next Adventures in Odyssey? And I think from when they're writing, they expect is the next episode the next day or that weekend, but the way they imagine the process is that we're working on the episode that week for the episode that's going to air on Saturday. But no, it takes a lot longer than that.
How did the character Eugene become to be?
Character of Eugene. Well, that one has a very specific story, because speaking of people writing in and suggesting characters to us, to kind of become part of Odyssey lore now, Odyssey legend, but true legend. An Odyssey fan wrote to Focus on the Family suggesting that Adventures in Odyssey should create a character like her dad, who was brilliant but always losing his keys. I would love to find this letter. I don't even know if the letter still exists anymore. Because it's 36 years old now. I don't know if we still have it in the archives anywhere. I've never seen it in person. But character who's brilliant but always losing his keys was her suggestion, and that was the seed of the idea for Eugene. Obviously, he's developed a lot more than that now. There are all sorts of aspects to his character, but that's where the seed of the idea came from. And the names came from a magazine. Paul McCusker was reading, I think the name of it, I'll probably get the name wrong. I think it was something like European Travel and Life, or European Travel Life, something like that. He was reading this magazine, and in the masthead for the magazine, where it credited the people who worked on the magazine, there was a Eugene and a Meltzner, and that's where the name of the character came from.
Are there any bloopers from the show?
Oh, there are many bloopers, some of which will never be heard by anyone, but occasionally we've released some bloopers on either podcasts or bonus features. Some of them really, they're funny to us, and we enjoy them, but they're almost more you had to be there in the studio. And then there are others that are just kind of, that they wouldn't really mean anything released on their own. So the answer is yes, there are many bloopers, some of which we'll release, most of which we never will. Excuse me.
How did Jules' band Manic Ravioli start?
Well, in the episodes, you've heard a little bit about it. We certainly heard how Jules became part of the band. Do you mean that like the behind the scenes, like how Adventures in Odyssey started the band?
Yeah.
Well, we needed, writer Kathy Buchanan needed something that could be part of Jules' spiritual journey. And in fact, something that was going to send Jules down maybe a darker path. And it made sense, since Jules was a singer, and also since we're an audio show, that this was something that we could hear that would maybe send Jules down the wrong path. Now, not all bands send people down the wrong path. In fact, I think a lot of them send people down the right path. But in this case, this was something that made sense for Jules to kind of shake things up in her life and send her in a different direction.
Now, was it based after the food ravioli?
Kathy really likes food humor. If you listen to her episodes, there's quite a bit of food humor in them. So I think it came out of that, just that she really finds jokes about food funny. But you'd have to ask her where the name Manic Ravioli came from. I think it really sounds like a band, but I'm not sure where the specific name came from.
Why did you change the character of Wyatt?
The actor who plays Wyatt?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're actually, we're going to answer that on an Odyssey podcast, but I can answer it here too. It's basically like it happens with a lot of our characters, is that kids have a way of growing up. I don't know if you've noticed that, but I think we probably have 4 people who've aged in this call right now, but kids age. And so the actor who played Wyatt for quite a while had essentially aged out of the part. And we had a story arc for the Perkins family that you're hearing right now in the Adventures in Odyssey Club that Marshall Younger had been planning for years. We actually talked about this on a recent podcast with the new actor who played Wyatt and Marshall. But the story would not have made as much sense if the character of Wyatt was now sounding like he was 17 or 18, and the actor who played him was sounding significantly older. Great actor, nothing against him. We didn't get rid of him for any reason. It was just that he was sounding a little bit too old for the character he was playing. And so we needed to get another actor who was going to get Wyatt back to about the age that we needed him to be for this story arc. And you see that with a lot of characters on Odyssey over the years, especially young boys, because young boys, when their voices change, when they are teenagers, they start to sound a lot different. With girls, they usually have a little bit longer life because their voices don't change as much. They do change, but usually not as much as the boys.
We're doing a skit for Odyssey on our podcast.
Okay.
Do you think you could write a script for us?
Probably not. Just because, that sounds like fun, but there are a few reasons why it would be difficult. One is just capacity, that I'm really busy with what I have to do with Odyssey, working on scripts this week, actually, for our January recording session. The other is just it's not a fun answer, but we have to be real careful with conflicts of interest and how we use our writing. So Hollywood in particular, thankfully, Adventures in Odyssey is at the very edge of Hollywood. We interact with Hollywood very briefly when we go and record our shows. Other than that, we're off on our own, which I'm very thankful because of some of the things that go on in Hollywood. But Hollywood is rife with lawsuits of people who claim, oh, this movie, that was my idea, and I sent that idea, and you read my idea and stole my idea. So we have to be real careful about ideas, where they come from, where we send ideas, and especially ideas that come to us. So it's a little bit of a side trip from your question, but yeah, unfortunately, we live in the fallen world that we do. In heaven, we won't have to worry about lawsuits, but in this world, we do have to worry about conflicts of interest and things like that.
What is your favorite Bible verse?
Favorite Bible verse is Proverbs 17:17. So, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity.
When did you get saved?
I was saved when I believe I was 5 years old. And I'm not sure if I remember the story or if my mom has just told it so many times that it's become a memory for me. But when I was 5 years old, I think I was at a house where she was at a Bible study. And one of the people who was in the Bible study apparently said something like, if you're not a Christian or if you're not saved, you can't go to heaven. And I started crying when I heard that because I didn't think that I had that yet or that I was a Christian yet. And so my mom talked me through it and told me what it meant to be a Christian. And so I think I used the phrase, again, I'm not sure if this is my memory or my memory of the story being told, but I think I used the phrase, ask Jesus into my heart, when I was 5 years old.
In the new album, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just looking at the time here, guys, and so I've got to go in a minute, but do you have any last couple of questions here before we sign off? Okay.
Just have one.
Yeah.
Are we going to have videos coming out? I know they teased that at One Grand Party. We were going to have like new animated
Yes.
series possibly in the future. And then also, will we have a live movie at some point, maybe way in the future, but could we possibly get like a live cast to do a show?
Well, let me
10, 15
answer
minutes?
the first part first, and then I'll have you unpack the second part. As far as an animated series, I don't want to say too much about it because we'll be doing some more formal announcements about this in the future. But because it was said at One Grand Party, I can say that a new animated series is in development. And we're working with some animators, some pretty well-known animators, and there are stories in process. There's a script, and so yes, new animation is in development. Animation takes a long time, and so don't be watching for it in the next few months because it's still a ways off. Now, the second part of your question, did you say a live movie?
Yes, like with actors and like maybe like a Friends scenario or like a live audience with the actors maybe,
So like a
or
movie
just a
in
plain
theaters
movie.
with the actors? Yeah,
Yeah, or like people, even if it's not the actual actors,
yeah,
but like people
and
playing those parts.
just zeroing in on your question, do you mean like a movie theater or do you mean like a stage show, kind of like we did here a few months ago?
Ooh, well, I'm like a movie, not like the actual voiceover artist doing the parts, like actually having actors play like a movie of like
Yeah, there aren't any
an
plans
Odyssey.
for a live action movie anytime soon. Again, it's a never say never. Could there be one someday? Well, of course there could be someday. Nothing planned right now. I don't know how much we've talked about this, but some years back, there was talk about a Fathom event. I'm not sure if you're familiar what Fathom events are, but they're like one-time events in theaters. And there was talk about doing an Odyssey Fathom event, and it's still a possibility. At the time, it just felt like the specialness of an Odyssey show was being there in person and seeing the actors in person, as opposed to going to a theater in your town and watching them on a screen, which you could theoretically do from home. But that idea could always come back around. There could be another angle that we haven't explored with that, to do some sort of live Fathom type event. Nothing on the horizon. As far as the stage show, though, we've done stage shows over the years. I mean, I've been involved with, like 5 of them, maybe 4 or 5 of them. So I'm confident we'll do another stage show someday. The one that we did here in August was so massive that I'm fine with taking a breather from that for a little while, taking a break for a little while, and then coming back again and doing another stage show. Hoping it's not next year. I don't think it'll be next year. Probably won't be the year after, but there will be, as successful as all of the live shows have been, I'm sure there will be another stage show.
Will Boswell ever return?
Well, the good thing about Boswell is that, you could probably get another cat to do the purring and meowing, and nobody would know the difference, I don't think.
Stephanie, get your cat.
Yeah, we'll send you some recording equipment. But again, no plans. I don't know that there's been a lot of call from our fans to have All's Well with Boswell 2, but never know. I don't know how old Boswell would be by now, but
Will there be another New Year's Eve live show?
That was fun. That was recorded at Focus on the Family here in November. Not that long ago, I came across the video from that event. It's pretty low quality. It wasn't really recorded with the intention of releasing it, but I found the video for it, and it was like opening a bunch of Christmas presents because it was all this material I'd never seen before. So maybe we'll find some way to release some little pieces of that. Again, it's pretty low quality, especially compared to the videos we're doing now and just the 4K high quality that we can do now. But as far as doing another New Year's Eve live, I think I didn't quite finish that story. That New Year's Eve live was recorded in November 1997 here at Focus on the Family. I'm pointing this way because the room where it was recorded is just 100 yards that way. As far as doing another New Year's Eve live, again, never say never. We don't have plans for like a live show to be a New Year's show, but why not? It could be.
That was one of my favorite New Year's Eve live shows. I have always listened to it on New Year's Eve.
That was the first live show, New Year's Eve live. I wasn't here for that one, but that was the first live show.
What live show were you here for?
The first one I was here for was the 15th anniversary. So it was the 15th anniversary of Odyssey, 25th anniversary of Focus. So it was called Live at the 25. And I've been part of all the Odyssey live shows since then. I've been part of in some way.
Will Jay ever become a Christian?
Again, no plans. We talk about Odyssey characters in terms of being dynamic characters and static characters. So a dynamic character would be someone like Connie or Eugene, that they change over the years. I mean, if you look at Eugene when he first showed up to Eugene in The Best Is Yet to Come when he left for Baltimore, Eugene changed very significantly as a character over the years. There were certain parts about him that didn't change, but he's a very different character when he leaves for Baltimore than when he showed up in Connie Part 1. So he's a dynamic character. He changed. A static character would be someone like Bart Rathbone. Bart Rathbone's pretty much always the same. I mean, there's the occasional exceptional episode where he seems to show a little twinge of change, but then he's pretty much back to his old Bart self in the next episode. And you need both kinds of characters for a show like Adventures in Odyssey. You need characters who can change, and you need characters who stay the same. Jay, it's a question on what kind of character he is. He's kind of a blending of the two, because he does seem to change in some ways, but in some ways, he doesn't really seem to grow and advance. He's kind of the same old Jay. And so no plans for Jay to become a Christian. Is it possible? Well, again, never say never, but probably not anytime soon.
Well, I'm thinking we can wrap this up now because you got to go somewhere.
Yeah, well, I'm actually meeting my wife and son. So yeah.
All right, you have been watching the Wonderful World of Odyssey podcast with me, Bree, and Stephanie, and Nathan Hoobler.
Hey.
Thanks for coming with us.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. Some really good questions in there, too. Thank you for asking those.
Even though you'll ask them again soon.
Thank you for.
Well, some of them are questions that'll just be asked over and over, and that's just part of the fun of it.
Yeah, thank you for your time, too.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, guys.
All right, bye.
All right.